I'm Dwayne Brown. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, echoing close to home the lessons learned from a deadly officer-involved shooting in Ferguson and the warning from college students who protested the violence.
And from too little peanuts to overly clean dishes, how exposure to some allergens may improve your child's health. I'm Peggy Pico with what to do and not to do in managing allergies. But first, San Diego State Assemblyman Rocky Chavez is the first major Republican contender to announce his bid for Barbara Boxer's Senate seat. Our conversation and why he says he can win.
What's going on now? Okay, everybody in the audience just laughed. Why are they laughing?
Helping blind people enjoy the San Diego Opera, a unique service painting a complete picture of all the action on stage. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining us. There are new measures at the state capitol aimed at protecting people who record police confrontations. Now, this comes on the heels of statewide protests over deadly officer-involved shootings like the one in Ferguson. A state senator from LA County introduced a new bill. It says citizens who are recording officers' audio or video are not breaking the law. The bill also says people are not allowed to stop officers from doing their jobs. From Ferguson, Missouri to the city of San Diego, the issue of racial profiling by police officers continues, although San Diego police don't believe there is an urgent problem. A coalition of college students disagrees and says it doesn't want another Ferguson incident here.
Our investigation showed that Ferguson police officers routinely violate the Fourth Amendment in stopping people without reasonable suspicion, arresting them without probable cause, and using unreasonable force against them.
The Justice Department conclusion this week resonated in San Diego, where a recent report from the city's Public Safety Committee showed black motorists in San Diego accounted for 11% of vehicle stops, but represent only 5.5% of the population. The numbers were even higher for Latinos stopped by cops.
We have to do something about that to change the culture of why these officers feel like they need to stop African Americans and people of color more than they would anybody else.
Mark Jones is with the Black Student Justice Coalition. They held a silent protest back in December during a city council ceremony, holding up hands to remember the fatal police shooting in Ferguson.
We don't want a Michael Brown case down here. We don't want some unarmed black man getting shot because there's a culture that permeates this type of behavior.
We tried to reach the police department's public affairs officer without success. Lieutenant Scott Wall was quoted earlier this week as saying, "Everybody has biases, and we provide training to our personnel that helps them understand biases and make sure they do not become a part of how we police."
Your bias is a lot more threatening to me if you're in a position of power. The normal person walking on the street doesn't have the authority to go and arrest somebody, doesn't have the authority to make a stop. We have to hold them to a higher standard because of that power and authority that they have. It's a very serious and real threat.
Police department says the findings demonstrate the need to constantly monitor their dealings with minority groups and the communities they serve. Thousands of immigrants deported from Southern California to Mexico may have a chance to return to the U.S. after a judge approved a request by the American Civil Liberties Union. Their lawsuit claims the Border Patrol and other immigration officials have been forcing immigrants to sign voluntary return forms. A signature may result in a 10-year ban on returning to the U.S. The lawsuit was settled, allowing 11 deportees to come back. ACLU is now looking for more immigrants who could join the case.
We are working with a lot of different organizations across California and throughout Mexico in order to diffuse this information as widely as possible.
To be eligible, immigrants must have reasonable claims to reside in the U.S. when they sign the form, like having family members with citizenship. Oceanside Assemblyman Rocky Chavez joins Peggy Pico to talk about his campaign to become California's next senator.
The retired Marine colonel represents the 76th district in Oceanside as a state assemblyman, a position he's held since 2012. Joining us from our KPBS North County Bureau, Assemblyman Rocky Chavez. Welcome to Evening Edition.
Well, I'm happy to be here, ready to answer some good questions.
Oh, good. Well, we have some for you, because so far you and Attorney General Kamala Harris are the only major contenders to enter the race for Barbara Boxer's U.S. Senate seat in 2016. So why are you running?
Well, I'm running because I actually think we have some serious issues that are facing us at a national level. You look at the Middle East and you look at ISIS and how our future is going to be decided in the future. It's time to send somebody to Washington, D.C. who understands foreign affairs and foreign policy.
In terms of voter support, though, in a recent nonpartisan field poll, you ranked at the bottom of 18 Republicans and Democrats who might run for Boxer's seats. Why do you think he can win this race?
Actually, there's other polls out there that I'm ranked number one in the Republicans. But, you know, polls are just polls snapshot at a particular time. We have nearly 2 years to go forward before the general election. And by that time, the California voters will have the opportunity to get to know who I am and what I stand for.
Now, comparatively on that note, you've had a limited political experience. Why do you think your experience, I should say, in the political world, how do you think that has prepared you for a U.S. Senate seat?
Actually, I had quite an experience. 28 years in the Marine Corps, got out in 2001, elected in 2002, served in a local area for 2 terms. I'm the only member of the Assembly or Senate in California who actually has ran a state agency, honored to run the California Department of Veteran Affairs. And then after that, as far as my opponent, I'm the only one who's actually has done legislative action to affect policy. So I would challenge that issue that I'm new to the political process, been involved in it quite a bit.
And, of course, you are a Hispanic legislator whose dad has worked in the fields, I understand, and you've said you support immigration reform. What specific immigration legislation would you like to see Congress pass?
Well, I think it's time that we recognize the people who make California what it should be made. They're working, hard people. They have dreams and aspirations the same as a lot of new immigrants to the United States. And as I tell people, you know, my father was 17 of 18 children. A number of his family members were born in Mexico, and they worked the fields up and down California. And when World War II started, he joined the Marine Corps and went off and fought in Tinian and Okinawa and Saipan. From that, he came back, was able to use a GI Bill, and at night going to college at El Community College, he was able to get into a specific area of electronics, and we were able to move up economically from a barrio in Redondo Beach, where the people who worked at the steel mills live, to Torrance, California. And that experience of hard work has shown me the value of education and hard work.
So would you support a specific immigration reform bill at the Senate?
Well, we already have. At Assembly, you know, in 2012, I was one of 3 Republicans that said we needed to have immigration reform, particular residency. From that, by the summer of 2012, I was able to convince 17 other Republicans in the Assembly to support immigration reform, calling for the federal government to do it. So I think I'm pretty clear on what we need to do. Residency is important. Children have the opportunity to go to college is important. Having the resources to be successful. As I tell people, if it's tough enough for a young kid to do well in school whose parents have never ever had an education, if they're capable to go to college, then we should support them.
Let me ask you this one last question here. By running for the U.S. Senate, you'll be effectively giving up your state assembly seat at the end of this term because you can't run for both. How do you think that would benefit your constituents in San Diego County, being a senator versus being a state assemblyman?
Well, as the Assembly member representing the 76th Assembly District, as you know, there's only 28 Republicans. So it's in California in the Assembly, a lot of the larger issues are driven by the Democratic Party. As a U.S. Senator in D.C. as a Republican, I would actually be in the majority party and able to affect change in policy.
All right, California Assemblyman Rocky Chavez, thanks so much.
In honor of International Women's Day, California celebrated with citizenship ceremonies, holding U.S. flags in their hands. 15 women and 1 man took the oath to become U.S. citizens at the Capitol building in Sacramento for Russian immigrant Elena Ivanova. This day brings reflection. She got a green card and came to California 6.5 years ago.
In January, I did fingerprint, and I had citizen test in Monday this week, and today I'm thinking that.
Immigration Services says individuals with green cards in the U.S. may begin the citizenship process after being here 5 years. The Dow Jones is hungry for Apple. The market index is replacing AT&T with the iPhone maker later this month. The Dow tracks blue chip companies. Wall Street considers it a leading bellwether of the nation's economic performance. Dow Jones says the move will balance changes in the stock market. Apple has made billions selling iPhones, Macs, and other gadgets. A special makeover for a vacant lot in downtown San Diego. KPBS reporter Claire Trageser says it started as a student project a couple of years ago.
This lot at Park and Market Streets used to be empty. Now it's transformed into an urban park with a dog run, coffee shop, stage, and beer garden. Final preparations are underway for the park's grand opening Saturday night. The idea started with a group of students from the New School of Architecture and Design. Philip Acatel was one of them.
There we really started looking at, what the whole concept of vacant land and tactical urbanism, and how we could start, creating a sense of place within the community.
They decided to build a temporary park on unused land owned by the city. 2 years later, they've achieved their vision.
There was plenty of days where it was ups and downs, but in the end, we were very excited to have gotten this far. We couldn't have done it without the support of the school and of the surrounding community.
They're leasing the land from the city through July 2016. They hope to stay longer, but their whole setup is temporary. They've built the park using shipping containers so they can move to a new unused lot.
And if we can get in there and do something quick, economical, and sort of make something fun and creative out of it, everyone wins.
The park will be open from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. on weekdays and from 7 a.m. until midnight on weekends. Acatel says 1,200 people are coming to the grand opening tomorrow night. Claire Trageser, KPBS News.
SeaWorld is calling in extra help for its sea lion rescue mission. The park has canceled its sea lion and otter show for the next 2 weeks. The changes start tomorrow. While trainers will be deployed with the animal rescue team, the goal is to treat an influx of sea lion pups who've been stranded up and down the coast. SeaWorld has rescued more than 400 pups in the last few months. That's double the number they would see all year. Imagine watching an opera with your eyes closed. There's a special service by the San Diego Opera to help the visually impaired enjoy all elements of a production. KPBS arts reporter Beth Accomando shows us what goes into providing the service.
When you go to the opera, this is what you expect to see. But if you're visually impaired, this is what you get. You have no super titles to translate the libretto, no sets to let you know where the action is taking place, and no costumes to convey the time period.
Opera isn't just music and singing. It's basically a full play/performance set to music and singing.
Bob Canish has been blind since birth. Opera drew him in with its impressive sounds, but initially he felt he wasn't as engaged as the sighted audience.
So what I wasn't able to do is I wasn't able to follow along with what was happening. I knew the synopsis, but I didn't know what part I was in now. What's going on now? Okay, everybody in the audience just laughed. Why are they laughing?
That's where Kay O'Neill comes in.
Come on, guys. We have a chance to really look it over before they get started. I do audio describing, and no one ever really knows what that is. We describe what goes on in the opera for someone who can't see it. The set has been moved to form 2 buildings with a street coming forward between them. Where we saw the inside of the Café Momu in the last scene, Now we see the outside street view.
If you do not have your sight and you enjoy what an opera can offer to you, you'll be amazed at how much more the description fills in and allows you to enjoy the experience.
That's true because O'Neill and her fellow volunteers are passionate about what they're doing.
Look at the curtains. Aren't those marvelous? How would we describe those?
For La Boheme, O'Neill got to see the set up close so she could describe it better and convey how the look colored the production.
All the grayness and everything it does, it just gives you that cold feeling.
The audio describers begin their work at the first rehearsal where they pick up a script of the super titles.
I have marked this ahead of time in rehearsals so that I know where I have a space where I can read some of the super titles. And so my job is to, during the pauses, get in what is happening, like Mimi staggers forward leaning on the building.
The challenge for them is to read enough of the dialogue and describe enough of the action so that you can be engaged in the parts of the opera that you can't gain auditorially, but while still allowing you to hear all this beautiful singing and music that's going on.
So it takes several rehearsals for us to have this ready, and then we crawl up the stairs to the top of this place, which is a feat in itself, and get ready on a microphone to describe for the people who have come in.
So then there's this little earpiece that you put in your ear, there's a little unit to which it connects that you put in your pocket, then they'll get into the opera.
When she hears Rodolfo coming, she hides herself behind the corner of the building.
They do not read in a monotone voice. They do inject life into it and really help to guide you along so that whatever the opera is going to deliver to you next that you can pick up with your ears, you're ready for it. But what really brought my complete enjoyment of opera to life really was when the describing came in.
This happened because Angela Kanish was working with the opera and working with the students, and her husband Bob is blind. And she said, you know, Bob loves to come to the opera and sit by me, but I have to say, and now this is happening, and then this is happening. And she'd say, people next door would go, shh.
When the describers came in, that's when it put a lot of things into focus. Because let's say a describer is describing a scene or some action that's going on and there's no singing. Now that you know what's going on, you can then focus in on how brilliantly the composer paints that picture with music.
And how brilliantly the audio describers help the visually impaired get a chance to see that bigger picture. Beth Accomando, KPBS News.
Bob Kanish also oversees audience services here at KPBS. San Diego Opera provides audio description services at all their shows.
California's top court strikes down part of Jessica's law dealing with paroled sex offenders. Commissioners for California's public utilities are under state and federal investigation. And you want to remodel or build? Well, the city's permit process may actually take less time these days. Join me for the KPBS Roundtable tonight at 8:30.
Two new allergy studies confirm what doctors have thought for years: we may be too clean and controlled for our own good. Peggy Pico finds out why and what to do about it.
The so-called dishwashing study found kids developed fewer allergies if their dishes were hand-washed instead of sanitized in a dishwasher. Another study confirmed babies who were fed peanuts were less likely to develop a peanut allergy. My guest, Dr. Kevin Say, a board-certified allergist at Kaiser Permanente San Diego, joins us with the details. And Dr. Say, the children in this peanut study, let's start with them. They were said to be high risk. How did early exposure to peanuts, so this high-risk group, result in having them less allergies or no allergies?
There's a phenomenon that we have known for a while called oral tolerance, and the idea is that consumption of a food or anything that you put in your mouth is more likely for your body to ignore that, thinking that whatever you put in your mouth is probably good for you, hopefully, and your body will immunologically ignore that. Sensitization can sometimes happen through the skin, and so if the first exposure of a particular food is in another way, like through the skin, there's a chance that your body will then become sensitized to it. So if there's two different ways to introduce the food, the thought is that you want to introduce the food orally at an early age when the immune system is still malleable and teachable, that it will learn to ignore that food as opposed to getting exposed to it in some other way where you may sensitize yourself.
Sure. Now, we know peanut allergies can be so very deadly. What should parents do right now after seeing this if they think their child has a peanut sensitivity or a peanut allergy?
The best thing a parent can do is to have their child tested with a board-certified allergist at their local healthcare system. During testing, we can ascertain the positivity of whether somebody is allergic or not. And the new study now is actually enabling us to treat people who are kind of at risk for developing peanut allergy in the future and giving them a chance to not be peanut allergic through early intervention.
Sure. I just want to make sure that the lesson is if you think your child has a peanut allergy, the answer is not to give them, try to sensitize them yourself.
Exactly.
Okay.
So you want to be careful with that.
Yeah, I understand the risk there. The dishwasher study, actually moving on to that, confirmed what a lot of parents have suspected for a very long time, and possibly the medical field as well. Describe what the dishwasher study was.
The dishwasher study was an observational study where the researchers actually handed out questionnaires to parents of kids who had allergies and asked them different habits that they have at home. And one of the questions that they asked about was whether they wash their dishes by hand or wash their dishes by machine. And it turns out that the hand-washed dishes seem to be protective from an allergic standpoint. We want to be careful between drawing any major conclusions from an observational study. There's biases that get instilled whenever a survey is pointed out or handed out. And so, but there have been other studies that suggested that exposure to pathogens and microbes early on in life may actually be beneficial to protecting against allergy. So this is one in a long line of studies that has pointed in the same direction. So we think there's probably some truth there, but I wouldn't necessarily go out and change any major habits with the way that you're doing things now.
It's called the hygiene hypothesis, right? And
Correct.
there's more studies being done on that as far as exposure to bacteria, maybe increasing the immune system.
The new wave of studies in the hygiene hypothesis actually centers around the probiotic thing that people have been really interested in recently. There have been some studies, especially in mice actually, that have shown that the diversity of the bacteria in your gut, and these are the good bacteria you're supposed to have, the probiotics, may actually be something that really can push your body in one direction or the other in terms of allergies or not.
So it's not actually taking on maybe bad bacteria that we already know. I see.
Right.
Let's talk about this, getting back to this tactic, exposure to tactile types of allergens for adults or children. Does exposure work for, let's say, if you already have allergies to mold, dust mites, pets?
The answer is yes. Allergy immunotherapy or allergy shots have been ongoing actually for at least 100 years, even before there were any institutional review boards or safety monitoring boards. Allergists were actually doing this in the back office, and they were basically giving injections, small amounts, safe amounts of allergen that you're allergic to, injected. And over time, if you come to your allergist on a weekly basis, we can actually increase the amount of exposure on a weekly basis, trying to teach your immune system again to become tolerant or to ignore the allergen.
But again, not something to try at home.
No.
Go to a specialist. What kind of impact do you think these two studies will have, the peanut study on the children and also the dishwasher study, might have in treating allergies in the future?
It's a very exciting time in allergy. What we're finding out, and we've kind of suspected for a while, as you mentioned, that the environment probably has something to do with whether someone develops allergies or not. Genetics is still the major player, and so that's something that we can't change. But the things that we can change are probably behaviors and environmental exposures that we have. And so if we're able to find out more about how to teach the immune system, then we can effectively treat allergies better.
All right, Dr. Kevin Say, thank you so much for the update.
You're welcome.
I'm Judy Woodruff. On the next News Hour, we join veterans as they return to Vietnam on the 50th anniversary of the start of the war. That's Friday on the PBS News Hour.
A dwarf planet is ready for its close-up, Mr. DeMille. NASA tweeted this update about its Dawn spacecraft. Now, it's in orbit around the dwarf planet Sirius following a nearly 8-year journey, 310 million miles away. NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab in Pasadena received a signal from the spacecraft. Sirius is the final stop for Dawn. It's located in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Sirius is the largest unexplored space rock in the inner solar system. They're coming together for one big beer festival, 72 breweries doing their part to help raise money for a good cause. KPBS reporter Matt Bowler drew the short straw on this story.
There isn't any beer here now, but soon.
Beer as far as the eye can see.
That's Eric Olkatek and his wife Amy created Best Coast Beer Fest, and he's happy to help her out.
She said, you know what, let's do a beer festival. And I'm like, yes!
But it's not just about drinking 70 different kinds of beers. The festival's raising money for a charity, Cancer for College. They give college scholarships to cancer survivors. Amy says while the whole event costs just over $100,000 to produce, they're already in the black for the charity.
Lot of luck, just crossing your fingers.
The park behind the convention center turns from a field of grass into one of San Diego's larger beer festivals. Eric says choosing the beers was grueling.
The research was, just every single beer festival that we possibly go to is just, getting dragged into it.
Eric's willing to make that sacrifice, for his wife.
So. Yeah.
Matt Bowler, KPBS News.
Beach weather on tap this weekend with a high wind advisory for the mountain areas. We may see wind gusts up to 30 miles per hour. Sunny along the coast, mostly in the 70s. Much warmer inland in the low 80s the next couple of days. Cooler in the 60s with breezy conditions in the mountains and 80s for the desert area. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night and a great weekend.